Welcome back to the Craic, ladies and gentlemen. You already had our fantastic preview show on the 27th of December. Well, guess what? We're back again. This time, because the year's over now, we can finally review it. Yes, I know you've been asking and dying to see this one happen, and you'll be happy to know that I have reassembled the great European crew from our preview show. That's right, it is Chisanga Malata from The Sun, Andy Stevenson from Severe MMA, and that dastardly man from Bloody Elbow, Donagh Corby. They're all back again. Lads, welcome back. This time for our review show. Chisanga, how are you? Look at that beautiful turtleneck.
Oh, I'm grand. I'm just trying to keep in like the post-festive spirit with like a turtleneck, keep the neck warm and everything. But I'm happy to be back. I mean, I get to listen to the great Andy Stevenson with some great takes and whatever Donagh Corby provides. But
shots.
I joke. No,
it's a bit harsh to saying. I think Donnagh's great.
Well,
Thanks,
what you
Andy.
have to
Thanks
remember
for
is
defending me.
Donagh was a rival. He obviously worked at the Mirror for several years, so he stole all my clicks, all my traffic, and I haven't forgotten about that.
This shit runs deep. Donagh Corby, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, no, I'm still stealing at a bloody elbow. I'm not sure if you guys read the biggest website in MMA. How about that? On SimilarWeb. I don't know what SimilarWeb is or how they get their analytics, but they said it. Do you know, actually,
it's owned by Mr. Elbow.
Yeah, it's owned by my boss, Vic Daniels. But no, it's the actuality of that is we were number 4, but the top 3 were all it was like Stream East, Craic Streams, and some other streaming website. So they don't count because they're like illegal websites. So we were actually number 4, but we didn't want to put in that we were behind all the illegal streamers. So I guess we're
lied
there, but yeah, we lied in a lot of ways. We lied, and Trent, I know, is going to be delighted to hear this. My old pal, but yeah, no, we're doing okay.
Andy Stevenson, how are you? Good to see bridges have amended between you and Corby since our preview show. That's fantastic to hear.
Listen, he was right with what he said in the last show. We did run into each other, and I'll be honest, it was great to see him. Maybe it's the post-festive spirit, maybe it's the turkey and the ham, but feeling pretty good. And yeah, congratulations also. We probably didn't say it. I was too busy sticking the boot into Donagh, but congratulations to you and the Young Crown team on all the success. It's great to see it. Great to see it. Great to be here.
You already did that on the last episode. There's no need.
No, I didn't really.
No, you two did.
It was more in jest. I wasn't very, wasn't very congratulatory.
Yeah, and
it was so long ago that I can't remember.
That's true. Like with Donagh and that self-praise, real success is silent. So I don't want to pat myself on the back. We will move on to some more successful people. One of which, of course, is the great Ilia Topuria. What I want to ask you, Chisanga Malata, is who are you picking? There seems to be a two-way dance at the moment. Who was your fighter of the year for 2024? Was it Alex Pereira or was it Ilia Topuria?
I think it's crystal clear. I think it was Ilia Topuria. Look, what Alex did. Well, what he's done over the last 18 months has been nothing short of phenomenal. But for Topuria to knock out not one but 2 generational greats back to back, I mean, it's well, what's the word I'm looking? What's the turn of phrase? I'm just so blown away by his achievement. I can't even speak, guys. It's a slam dunk for me personally. Like I know you can pick holes in the win over Volkanovski and say, look, he was only 5 or 6 months removed from that head kick loss to Islam, but Topuria just hits so goddamn hard. And as we saw in the Max Holloway fight, that even if Volk had a year layoff and his brain was as healthy as can be, he probably could have had his light shot out by the same combination. Yeah, for me, it was El Matador, Ilia Topuria. You can also pick holes in Alex Pereira's, one of his wins coming back fighting Jamal Hill, who's fighting for the first time off Achilles injury. And then the whole little situation between Herb Dean and then Herb Dean allegedly, well, if you're Jamal Hill, if you're Team Hill, which there's not many people on, but allegedly getting in the way and then allowing Alex to close the distance and knock him out. But for me, it was Ilia Topuria, who I said in the previous episode is the key to Spain and Central Europe. El Matador had a fantastic year, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he does next year, or this year, I should say.
Donagh, do you agree with that? Do you have him as your fighter of the year? Male fighter of the year, should I say?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the argument could be made for Pereira as well, right? Because he had such a great run. But if you look at the level of opponent, I think that Pereira probably loses out a bit of steam because Khalil Roundtree was the last fight. You know, because you look at the first two. I mean, Jamal Hill, phenomenal win, and of course Yuri again. But yeah, I think Topuria to knock out Max Holloway is something that literally hadn't been done before, and then to do what he did to Volkanovski as well. It does seem fairly clear to me that he's fighter of the year.
Andy, there was kind of there was a lot of talk with Volkanovski, obviously, and his status within the pantheon of featherweight greats. We're already hearing that Ilia is talking about moving to 55. That's been rebuffed somewhat. But do you think we we will see that develop over the next few years, where Ilia Topuria becomes a guy who we're considering one of the greatest featherweights ever, or do you think his days are numbered at 145?
I think that latter part is very much unclear, and like people say a lot of things. We'll have to see how that unfolds, but I think that I would like to see him stay at 145. I think that he can become, we're very, very premature in saying anything like this right now, but he could go on to become the greatest featherweight ever. Like, he has that potential with the performances that he's putting on. And like, to Donna's point there about who he's faced, MMA fans and particular MMA Twitter, or MMA X, which is just a lovely place. Um,
Oh
there's
yeah,
this kind of revisionist history that always happens after a certain amount of time, where it's happening with Jon Jones's career. I've seen in recent months at the moment, like when you look back on it, no disrespect, I think they're phenomenal fighters, but Jamal Hill, Yuri Prohaska, and Khalil Roundtree, like, there's potential there that in 10 years time from now, you'll have the next generation of MMA fans talking about how, they were never any good. Whereas I don't think you'll see the same for Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway. I think, their careers, their legacies will live on for decades to come. But to answer your point, will he go up and fight 155? I think he probably will at one point. But I think there's real potential there for him to become an all-time great at featherweight.
Dakota.
Return.
Sorry, go
Sorry,
ahead.
sorry. A return to 155. Obviously, he fought Jai Herbert at
Oh, that's
155
right. Yeah.
Oh
at
yeah.
UFC London, and Jai gave him the most trouble that he's actually had. Remember, he dropped him with that switch head kick. I think with Ilya, his coach Jorge Clemente, he was on Submission Radio, if I remember, and he said that Ilya cuts about something like 40 pounds to make featherweight.
Jesus.
He's a muscular guy in general. Like there's no body fat for him to lose in terms of aiding his weight cut. So I think 155 is definitely in his future, in the near future. But um, I'm kind of piggybacking off Andy's point. I think the whole two division champ thing for me is kind of played out. It doesn't have that much luster anymore.
I
But
agree.
yeah, what I prefer to see is a fighter like have pure dominance over a division for several years, like we've seen with Volkanovski at featherweight. Establish yourself as a go in that division, and then if the opportunity comes up to move up and for a super fight against Islam, then take that opportunity. That's what I prefer to see. Maybe people might be saying I'm an old woke. So and so, harking back to simpler times in the UFC. But if I'm Taporia, stay at featherweight for as long as you can and for as long as you can be healthy and try cement your legacy there. This one title defense and heading up. Granted, obviously you just knocked out Max Holloway and the Volkanovski back to back. That's not for me. I mean, you need to establish your legacy at 145.
Now
The
that
other
being
thing is he's
said,
5'7" as well. Like, that, there's a huge size gap there if he goes up to 155.
Mm.
Hmm.
the move to 55 could be the key that unlocks this whole Madrid event. If he, I mean, think about
Yeah.
this: a non-title fight in Madrid against Paddy Pimblett.
So
You think that wouldn't be the biggest fight that the UFC have put on in years?
Yeah, it's huge. It's immediately
Absolutely
huge.
we should
monumental.
have said that in the previous episode of like
Yeah.
the biggest fights that can
It's
actually
really
be
more
made.
for the previous episode, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like,
No,
oh yeah.
that's a great shout, man. Talking about fighters of the year, how good is it done to see PFL with the Dakota Ditcheva, having her in that mix? you know, you talk about spectacular, she's that. You talk about marketable, she's that. She's got everything going for her right now after a brilliant 2024. Do you think she will top most people's lists when it comes to female fighter of the year 2024?
Well, that's the one upside of doing the PFL season, and I know the PFL season comes in for a huge amount of criticism, and I'm hearing rumblings that maybe there might be some changes to the structure next year, but I think that it gives you 4 fights, right? So that automatically puts you in the strata of someone who has been super active, and those 4 fights happen really quickly too. It's like April to November, so and I think like she didn't, but like someone like an Impa Kasanganai, he could have been right up there if he'd won the tournament, because he would have had, I think, 5 fights in the year. But yeah, I think that she's done an incredible job. I mean, to beat Tyler Santos the way that she beat her, Valentina Shevchenko certainly didn't do that or anything close to it. I mean, Santos, someone who would be known as being tough, someone who would be known as being durable, as someone who can do 5 rounds, to essentially make her quit, essentially make her her almost tap to strikes in a way. Like, it is impressive from Dakota. So yeah, she certainly would make the most sense. I don't know that there's any other ladies who have had such an incredible year that you would rank it higher than Dakota's, as far as I'm concerned.
I was wondering about what would happen there, Donagh, to be honest, because I do feel that's becoming quite a problem for PFL. That when you get these champions and they're interviewed for the first time after they win these belts, most of them will say, unless it's Aubin Mercier or one of these guys, most of them be like, "I'm not doing that tournament again." And if that's like the pinnacle, like that is a complicated thing for me for the promotion. How important is it to keep someone like Dakota on their books, Andy? Like when you think about what she's done on the previous episode we did with the preview of 2025, Chisanga spoke to the mainstream interest that's in this person. When you have someone that's compelling this kind of intrigue, they've got to keep her on their books, right? And they've got to figure out a way to do something exciting that will keep people coming back to watch Dakota Ditcheva.
100%. And even from a PR perspective, like especially with what's been going on for PFL and you know the very high profile champion Bellator fighters who've been incredibly outspoken, wanting releases from their contracts, like to have a commodity like Dakota Ditcheva, where you can say, look at this fighter that we picked up from the regional scene. She went through our European system, became a champion there. She went up to the world level. She became a champion there. Did it in incredibly impressive fashion. Where, like, for my money, I think she has been the female fighter of the year worldwide. You know, that that is an example and a tool for them to say this is indicative of the success of the program that we have here, where we can develop fighters on the European scene through that, and then to a world level where they're still successful. You have to keep fighters like that. They've already lost the likes of Kayla Harrison, and you know, I think PFL do a great job of building those fighters, you know, getting those commodities, but you know, on the back end, not to go on a side tangent, you know, we've seen kind of the rhetoric and the communications that they've had around Harrison since she left. So you have to treat your fighters well, obviously, when you have them, when they leave too, ideally. But this is why, you know, when you've got other fighters who have left and who are calling for their release, the ones that you have right now, the Dakota Ditchevas, you know, and then you've got the likes of Chanel Dyer, who, you know, if you can keep
Amazing.
Dakota Ditcheva around, I don't think this is anywhere close right now. You know, Chanel's only 23, I think Dakota's 26, different points in their career. But in time, in 2, 3 years from now, if they can keep Dakota Ditcheva and if they have Chanel Dyer and she continues to excel and progress in the way she has been, there's a super fight on their hands there, a UK super fight in time. We're a long way away from that. But what PFL need to do now is not just have it so that they're developing their stars that are just eventually primed to move on to the UFC. They have to be able to retain them. Otherwise, they'll just always end up being a feeder league to the UFC, which is what they, you know, that will be the reality. So that it's imperative that they keep the likes of Ditcheva, and you know, Paul Hughes, etc., who are obviously kind of making waves as well. It's crucial to their success.
And just by the way, quickly, super quickly, they were, not to be, you know, defending PFL all the time, whatever, but they were phenomenally good to Kayla Harrison relative to
Oh
her
yeah,
star
when she
power
was there.
while she was there. And I think so. They've taken a couple of shots, which not even super direct shots. I think that in the grand scheme of things, Kayla Harrison herself would probably tell you that the checks and balances on the PFL and Kayla Harrison relationship, they were very good to Kayla Harrison for a long time.
Thanks for clearing that up, Donagh. We were all waiting
Yeah,
on that one.
oh,
Thank you.
shit.
I'm just wondering though, to
Is that Don? Is Don?
Don, are you there?
Don Corby?
On the back of
You
that
don't think
glaze,
Don's
I mean,
short for
point.
Donagh?
I wondered, Chisanga, because look, Donagh raised a good point in terms of the way PFL can zoom in on these athletes in a previous episode. Does Dakota feel so big because she's with PFL, like as opposed to with UFC, like, and the weight they can put behind her?
I think so. I mean, let me ask you, throw the question back to you guys. Do you think that she would be as big a star with her resume, well, the equivalent resume which she could rack up in the UFC if she was in the UFC in comparison to PFL? I personally don't think so. I don't think the UFC would put as much shine on her as PFL have done, and that's a testament to PFL. Look, they've, as Andy said, they picked her up from the regional scene. They've seen that she's got all the markers for a potential star. She's obviously, first and foremost, she's a great fighter. She's aesthetically pleasing on the eye to many a person, which obviously helps when you're building a superstar as well. For me, now the question is, I know that I said the Chris Cyborg fight as a potential next fight for Dakota. The question is, how are you going to keep her around? Obviously, she's locked into a contract for however long, but if you're not giving her the fights which are going to be financially rewarding and test her skill set, she's going to want to go elsewhere eventually.
Mm. Yeah, that is it. And as we said, that is a situation they're going to have to keep dealing with. Sticking on the UK point, Chiz, I was wondering, like we were at UFC Manchester, as was Andy. Um, they've returned to the normal time in London this year, and it has, like, we have to remember they went to Manchester because there was so many people getting upset about the London show. Now they did the Manchester show at this late time, and they're back to doing the London show. Is this a reaction, do you think, to what Manchester was, the aftermath of Manchester? Even though we had some great results with like Aspinall, Paddy Pimblett, they raised the roof there. We obviously had a bit of a main event where there was a lot of people in the crowd trying to catch some Z's while they were watching it. Do you think this is a direct reaction to UFC Manchester going back to the London date, the usual one?
Yeah, I think so, but I think more so a reaction to them catching me cage side, inhaling Red Bull after Red Bull just to try stay away. And then when I got back to my hotel, like my heart was just like pounding just because I consumed so much caffeine in such a short space of time. No, I think so. I think the UFC know where their bread is buttered in terms of the UK market, and it's doing it at prime time. They did it obviously with Usman Edwards 3, which is why the late start time for Manchester was received such a backlash. But yeah, I think it's a direct correlation, and obviously Dana just wants to return to the world famous and historic O2 Arena as he describes it. Even though he probably won't be there, it'll be Dave Green who'll be fielding questions from the media at the end because it's quite.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and they've been fantastic cards over the years. I particularly think that 2022 one with Tom and Volkov was just this amazing scene to be at, like just incredible. Paddy, etc., Arnold Allen, Jack Shore on the card, everyone was so good that night. But Tom was becoming this guy where he's like the main event in the UK. I think we saw a big change in tide with Tom Aspinall in 2024. And I think this story is to develop. I think this Jones and Aspinall saga will go on and on. I wonder, like, how much did Tom benefit from that MSG card where he showed up as the backup fighter that nobody was going to fight, barely said a word, and suddenly everybody is roaring about Tom Aspinall while Jon Jones is fighting Stipe Miocic for the most part.
Yeah, well, I remember, I'm not sure if it was you, Chiz, I was talking to, or if it was Oscar Willis, but I remember someone saying that Tom, when he was in New York, actually was turning down media opportunities because he didn't want to go there as this beg who's, just, he's shown up in New York like a Shannon Briggs type of thing, where he's just like trying to get in Jon Jones's head. And he played it like, I mean, he's, for someone who seems on the surface to like not care about that kind of thing, he plays these things phenomenally well. His understanding of public relations is he's not dissimilar to Tyson Fury in that way, where for someone who pretends to be like the everyman, or not pretends, but who plays the everyman kind of character, someone who acts that way. He's very savvy in terms of knowing what will get the people going, and certainly he played New York City that week like unbelievably well. And the less you saw of him, the more it made him kind of a looming figure over the event, as opposed to if he did the old Briggs and was showing up at the press conference and was asking questions. If he did like the Tony Bellew at the Mike Tyson Jake Paul thing, something like that, it wouldn't have been nearly as effective as it was. Well, he played it incredibly.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's like less was more. It's like in fact, I'm not going to use that analogy. I was going to say it's like when you see too much of. In fact, I'm not even going to go down that road. Anyway, you guys can surmise what I'm going to say. But let's. I think Petesy has insight into my mind and knows where I was going. But you played it perfectly there. And I was one of the many media who got snubbed by Mr. Aspinall during fight week. But
wow, Tom.
Hey,
I was just about to make a point about him being a great guy and this great ambassador. It's gone now. Aspinall, you're finished.
Well, yeah, well, which I
Jones is right, asshole.
Confirmed asshole. Yeah, this is unbelievable.
No, I completely understand. Like I've been turned down by fighters during fight weeks. I know it wasn't technically a fight week for him, but I'm used to that. Although he did go to the big wig in my parent company a few weeks later in Piers Morgan. I mean, that's made me feel very, very little after. But no,
Two very similar people, you and Piers.
Yeah, identical interviews, I'm sure.
What a performance on Piers Morgan as well. What a great showing to that new audience that wouldn't have known him as well. He came across so well, and he like in general, he just is someone who plays these things. He's talented in the way he portrays himself. It certainly, I mean, it made the whole Jon Jones calling him an asshole thing make so little sense, because you could totally understand. Oh, like if he did the Shannon Briggs type thing, you could understand Jon Jones being like, this is embarrassing, he's an asshole, all this stuff. But it was like, what makes him an asshole? He didn't do anything to disrupt you in any way. He didn't bother you or Stipe whenever he saw you guys around the place. There's no argument to be made that he portrayed himself like an asshole at all that week. If anything, Jon Jones, the way he was carrying on, might have taken that title.
To Chisanga's point about less is more, it was kind of like show don't tell. He didn't go up there and sing his own praises. And Jones's kind of take on all this has, for the most part, been these UK fans want him. It's just people, I don't know, nobody actually really wants to see this fight. But then he shows up on fight week, and I'm sure the UFC potentially, or maybe might have had a similar mindset to that, to be like, how much do people really want this fight? But then when you go to America, you don't really do a whole lot other than be there, and then all of a sudden there's this outpouring of emotion and just vocalness, I guess, for Tom on his behalf, and not coming from him but from the fans, from the American fans in attendance there. Like, that is a slap on the face to both Jones and the UFC to say this is real and you should be taking this seriously.
Yeah, he had a massive year, Tom. I feel like the pressure is on the UFC and Jones. I think the pressure is off him to a large degree now, based on how everything went that week. I don't think Jones liked it one bit either. I think you can only look to the first pay-per-view of the year, UFC 311, to understand what, once again, was a massive 2024 for the boys from Dagestan. I mean, gee, I feel like this is a conversation we're going to have for the next decade, and probably after that again. Of course, we have Islam v Arman, that's Armenia v Dagestan, and then we have Umar Nurmagomedov against Merab in a very spirited fight there in early January. But this narrative of these Dagestani lads just being savages, Andy, can you see that going anywhere at all over the next 10 years? Because I feel like as soon as one leaves, another comes. Like, there's just an endless conveyor belt of talent in that region.
I think as far as the conveyor belt, I think that is going to continue to churn out. Like, that ain't slowing down anytime soon. It is like they are bred for combat. Like, it's so impressive, the amount of fighters, the volume of fighters that come through that region. I think as far as their dominance in the sport, it will only start to slow down when the rest of the world adapts and learns that they now need to go and learn the type of grappling, the chain wrestling, whatever it is that is, the potent weapon of the Dagestanis. You have to master that to be able to then taken apart. I think we've seen that with jiu-jitsu over the years, where when the UFC was in its infancy, it was the jiu-jitsu practitioners who were kind of dominating, and if you didn't know jiu-jitsu, then you were screwed. And then all of a sudden, everyone's a black belt now, and it's much less of it's a finishing threat, of course, but it's the wrestling and it's the in between pieces of fighting, of combat, that are more important, I would say. That's going to be the case with this, but we're not there yet. Like, people don't know how to combat this. They're not as proficient in it, and like that takes years and years and years. Like, they are learning to wrestle and grapple in the way that they are in the combat sambo, kind of style, since they're 3, 4, 5 years old. Like, they've 20 years of this under their belt before they get to the UFC. So that's what it's going to take from various other regions around the world, everywhere in the world, to be able to combat this. Of course, we will see instances where it's overcome, and I think we have seen some of those, and we will continue to see more. But until it's widespread, we're going to see a lot of dominance from that region.
Yeah.
Especially when they're turning out kickboxers like Shara Bullet, who's obviously fighting.
Yeah.
Although he is the black sheep, though. It's his wrestling that's not that good. It's weird, but I mean, once he marries up the two, I mean, it's just going to be, it's game over.
And of course, it can't be denied that the longer these guys stay basing themselves in Russia, the more difficult it is for anyone to get in and like maybe test them. So that's all good too.
Here we go.
Corby. That's why I call them dastardly. That is a typical
conspiracy Corby here. Conspiracy Corby.
I'm not saying. I'm just saying no, it does make it more difficult than someone in, say, Florida, like Paul Hughes.
Oh, wow. Wow. That is a reference to this, of course, January 25th, about Hughes v. Nurmagomedov. We can clearly see what side Donnagh's on there, weaving his web of conspiratorial thought once again. Unbelievable stuff. I actually have a question for you, Donagh, here. This is something that Ariel asks me about all the time, and I kind of have to... I have only been to PFL Europe events. I know you've been to quite a few in the US. PFL Europe is not available in the US for people to view, but their impression is after one has happened and they're looking back on the clips and they see these amazing scenes in Paris and of course all around Europe, but Paris being that real pinnacle point for PFL Europe. Has PFL Europe succeeded more than PFL Global in terms of getting fans intrigued in the product, like the live shows in particular, as we've seen in the Accor Arena and stuff? Do you think they've been a bigger success on the ground than PFL Global?
Yeah, and actually, to even add to that, I think the PFL MENA as well is also probably better. I mean, we just don't see it ever. We don't keep up with it, but you should have seen the way the media and everything were carrying on when this Hatan Al-Saif came into the room for media day, like amateur fighter, not even a pro, atom weight, and she came in and it was like, on that same day, Brendan Loughnane was in there. A couple of weeks earlier, Francis Ngannou had been in that same room, and people were really just going nuts over this Hatan Al-Saif. So MENA and Europe, and I think that's probably the route they should be kind of exploiting more, is having these big shows in these regions that are not super well fed, I suppose, by the UFC, where like they do a yearly Paris show for the UFC. But it's always not an afterthought, but it's like, it's a fight night. It's like, you're never going to get a big pay-per-view. And the fact is, when Cyril Gane, for all the great nights in Paris he had, when the big night came and he had to fight for the world title, it had to be in Las Vegas. And and that's how it is in the UFC. So Conor McGregor, right? What an amazing night at the 3 Arena. But when the big nights came, they absolutely, under no circumstances, could be anywhere but Las Vegas or New York. And it's the same at any level. So I think that the PFL have an advantage in that regard, where if someone emerges as a big star, Cedric Doumbé, or to a way lesser extent, like a Paul Hughes, or like I said, a Hatan Al-Saif in Saudi, they can just go to that place and put on a huge event. You were at the one in March when Doumbé fought Baki. I was at the slightly smaller one when he fought Jaleel Willis in May, but still a huge event with a massive, massive crowd, and a rowdy crowd too. And yeah, I think if I were PFL, I'd probably be bringing this Road to Dubai Champion Series, whatever it's called, around Europe and around these regions where they have bigger fan bases. And I would probably put the global season on the background, because these American shows they're getting there, but they're not quite there yet. And then certainly the last American show I went to was in Washington, the week when they launched Ngannou versus Renan Ferreira, and they had all this media flown out and everything, and it was a whole big event, and Jake Paul was there, all this stuff. And that was definitely, compared to the finals that were in the same venue a year earlier, that was a much bigger event, and the atmosphere was much better, and they sold way more tickets. But they're still not quite there in America. They just don't have American stars yet, whereas they have big European stars, and it's a much more attractive event to be going to in Europe than it is. I think the European shows are better than the European UFC shows. That I don't think that's a crazy thing to say.
Yeah, no. I really appreciate your insight on that. Certainly the feeling I got, and especially when I was at the Accor Arena that night, as you said, for the Backy fight, just incredible. Like one of the most memorable live events I've been at. I won't go any further because Donagh always slags me for saying the same thing over and over again about that event. But sticking with PFL Europe, obviously we've talked about Ditcheva, we've talked about Hughes. Even earlier, Andy referenced Chanel Dyer. Do you believe that they have another star here, Andy, in McGrillen? And I know Chisanga will want to weigh in on this as well. He's a UK guy. This guy, the very first time I saw him was just during an amateur face-off that Kane Musa had shared, and I was already hooked. I didn't even know the guy won fights. I just saw this aggressive dude, like a coiled spring before he fought, and he has delivered in abundance, I feel, for PFL Europe. Is he another European star that they can look forward to using on the global scale, Andy?
I think he is. I mean, I think he's got the personality to certainly be a star. I mean, the fight that he had against Dean Garnett was, for me, the
Potential
fight of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I genuinely, I voted for it on the Severe May, whereas I thought it was the fight of the year. I don't see how.
Was it like 17 knockdowns or something, was
It
it?
was just bananas. It was just an absolute car crash. People falling all over the place, and eventually he finished Garnett. It's just nuts. But like, you know, he has the entertainment factor from his fighting style. He has the entertainment factor from his personality, the way he kind of gets at people's faces. There's always a bit of bite about him. It's never, you know, it's usually at least not very friendly. You know, not necessarily disrespectful, but not friendly when it comes to this. But I just think. What we don't know yet is his ceiling. Like, as far as how far he can go in the cage, I think that is yet unproven. Obviously, look, he's after coming off some phenomenal performances this year. As I said, fight of the year, and he's after finishing the final against Alexander Luster in, you know, very impressive fashion. It'll be interesting to see, you know, when I think of the likes of, say, like, I don't know, from an Irish perspective, like Kieran Clark, Nathan Kelly, he's kind of, I feel like he's like at that level at the moment where hasn't made the full jump to the worldwide level of competition, and so it remains to be seen to what level he can go to. But if we're talking Europe right now, like, I'd say lash him back into the European season again would be my view on this one. Let him continue to build, and then in time give him that step up to the world level. We've seen him, you know, he has a loss against Wesley Mayen. Obviously, it was probably a year or a little bit more ago now. But, you know, there's no point in rushing him immediately to that world level when he may not be, you know, at that level of his career just yet. But I think if they match make him correctly, he has huge potential to be a star for them.
I do think he has huge potential to be a star, and his fights are super exciting. He'll probably, if I were to predict how his career goes, I mean, he could obviously make some big changes, but he probably will be a star more in the vein of like a Masvidal, maybe to a lesser extent a Mike Perry type of star, where like he'll have huge fights, and probably he'll end up
cult following, like.
Yeah, he'll end up having big fights, and he could be a bigger star. Like, if you want to talk Masvidal, way bigger star than Bilal Muhammad, right? No doubt, in terms of that. And I mean, you could even argue that Mike Perry is probably a bigger star than Bilal Muhammad at this stage. And he'll be someone like that who has fun fights. He won't always win them, but he'll definitely have fights that people want to see. I mean, that European final was great. That last one, I just don't know that he's going to be like. I don't know that he's going to be beating Dagestani guys and all of that in 3 or 4 years time. Look, maybe I'm wrong on that one, but I think he'll be a star for sure, and probably a bigger star than a lot of these PFL guys. Like, I think he's already probably someone who it would sell more tickets in a Manchester than say the guys who have like a Gadzi Rabdanov who won the whole PFL global tournament. You'd probably argue he's already a bigger name than someone like that. So he's definitely on the right track, but I don't know that he's going to be someone who is winning world titles or anything.
Do you know what though? Apologies for interjecting here.
These are both
but,
just killing. Chisanga, the only UK
oh,
guy
sorry,
here. And he's
sorry, sorry.
Let us. He has
No,
red
but-
hair. We'll just keep going here.
As Donagh was talking there, all I was thinking was Paddy Pimblett. That's all that was going through my mind, because like,
Oh yeah.
there's a like, you know, if you were to say when Paddy Pimblett entered the UFC, most people didn't, I think, expect him to get this far. And to win the fights that he has, and he's proven people wrong. And you talk about that cult following that McGrillen is kind of amassing. That's what Pimblett had in Cage Warriors. So I think there's a lot of parallels that could be drawn there, and we don't know. I think that like there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of skepticism as to the ceiling, and I think that is even still there for Pimblett today, and that has always been there for him. So I think, you know, UFC is Pimblett, PFL could have McGrillen Evans.
What do you think, Chisanga?
You've just stolen all my points there, Jen.
Oh.
No. No. Yeah, I believe the Maya loss was nearly a year ago. I think it was like the first week of last December. But he's bounced back incredibly well. I mean, suffering such a loss early into your career can make or break a fighter. But he seemingly bounced back well from the 3 wins on the bounce, and obviously that absolute war with Dean Garner. But yeah, as you're saying, he's got the makings of a star. It might just be the mullet, or maybe his.
It might be the mullet.
It might be the mullet, or his public declaration of being a flat earther. Or
Is he a flat?
Yeah, do you not remember seeing that? Or am I making this up? No, I'm not making.
I hope he is, to be honest.
Yeah. I think he did. Yeah, say something. If I'm wrong, I apologize. But he does have that must see factor. Like anytime there's a Lewis McGrillen fight, I'm always tuning in. Well, depending on what time, because now that I've got a kid, I'm in bed by 9 o'clock most days.
Which is fair.
Yeah. But yeah, or I'm always making sure that I catch up with the highlights. I did like the comparison to Paddy Pimblett. He is slowly but surely building up a cult-like following, and even just his face-offs are must-see TV as well. So I'm excited to see what he does next year. But as Andy said, the ceiling for him, I mean, like the jury's going to be out on that. But he's still only 24. He's still getting better. I mean, he could absolutely smoke everybody again if he goes into the European series and then show that he's ready to mix it with the elite. We don't know. But if I were him, I would. If I PFL, sorry, I would follow Andy's suit, put him back in the European series again for next year, just to keep building his star, keep cultivating the fan base around him, and then maybe, well, in 2026, have at him in the global series.
Yeah, I like those ideas. I like the idea of him back in with Europe as well. I wonder how he feels about it. That's always a different story. Look, we know now that Paris is one of these booming cities. France is just a booming MMA hub at the moment. UFC, PFL having massive events. We know KSW and Saladin Parnasse had another massive event just towards the end of December. 16,000 odd people going there. What I wanted to ask you guys is, should we be paying more attention to Octagon? They nearly had 60,000 people in an arena earlier this year. We're just coming off the back of the Will Fleury fight, obviously, against Formula. Do you think that I've tried to watch the promotion, and I have watched events. I don't have the same skin in the game when it's not someone like Fleury. I know they have Shamrock there as well. When they don't have those guys on, I feel like it's tough for me to get involved, because I don't know a lot about some of the talent that are on the cards. So that's my misgivings when it comes to the situation. But for you, Andy, do you think this is something that deserves our respect? This is something that we should be tuning into regularly, or is it similar to KSW in the way that it's very region specific?
I think it's a little bit of both. I don't know. Like I tried to get into it. And I think firstly what they're doing is incredible. Like the selling out. You know, I think they broke the world record. At least the claim is definitely that they broke the world record, the UFC's record in Australia, with their show earlier on in 2024.
Only Pride events have had more. You know, the Saitama Superdome ones, like, they're insane though. You know.
Yeah, but like for any promotion to be able to do this is absolutely incredible, and it is region for specific in the sense that like they have their markets like in Prague, in Germany, in Slovakia, and other places in Europe where they will deliver, where they will pull in the fan bases. Obviously, they tried a show in the UK, it didn't go well at all, and they've since changed course and kind of pulled out of that region, it seems, for the most part, which is completely understandable. So I think it's incredible what they're doing, and I actually think that they do a really brilliant job of storytelling and like trying to to tell the kind of English speaking and the Western European audience what's going on with their Octagon UK and Ireland channel. I remember doing an interview with Brian Lacey kind of maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago at this point. And like I was like, wow, I'm all in after seeing some of these scenes, because it felt like this promotion that was the new KSW, that was something to pay attention to. But for whatever reason, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just on me. I haven't kept up with it, and I've only really been watching it as the Irish fighters and the fighters that I'd be more familiar with are fighting on it. So I'm not sure what they need to do. I think like if they were like if it was PFL putting on these events, I think this would be all over the place. I think they'd be singing from the rafters. I think when what it is likely when the American media is watching, like they'd be all over this. They'd love it. But the fact that it's not a PFL, it's not a UFC, it's more difficult. And so I think it will probably remain like a KSW for the foreseeable until they can, I don't know what it is necessarily they need to do, but the casual interest is not there. I think what they're doing is brilliant, but it's the interest is not where it perhaps should be.
No, that's a great answer. Before we go, we're just into the last question now. I wanted to ask, and you guys, Andy and Donagh, please tell me if you think I'm wrong about this. With McGregor's situation in Ireland and the highly publicised civil case, he was accused of raping Nikita Hand. A jury found on the balance of probabilities that they thought it did happen. Since then, brands have dropped him. I've noted on Ariel's show that there's a very different reaction to this in Ireland and the US. It's very different in comparison to the reaction there. But I wanted to know from Chisanga, like, is that a knock-on effect to the UK and in Europe in some ways, this news about Conor? Because certainly we've seen Tesco and other companies like that react in the UK. It's probably not as visceral as it is in Ireland, but the fact that he is the biggest name the sport has ever seen, do you think that impacts badly on the perception of MMA in general for you
I
where
think
you
it
are?
does. No, I think it does. And for context, one of my wife's best friends came over to the house last weekend, and the first thing that she asked me about was the result of the civil case. So that just shows you how far the jury's ruling at the Dublin High Court has permeated the general public. I think it's obviously what happened or what was deemed to have happened that night was an absolutely horrendous ordeal, and we wish Miss Hand, if she can ever get over it, that she can. But I think that sadly, well, look, McGregor's done a litany of things over the years which have drawn public condemnation, but none more so than this. Obviously, you guys are on the ground in Ireland. I'm only seeing little bits which are being relayed by you guys, and all three of you done a very good job in covering and commenting on this case, which I should give you credit for. But yeah, here now the things that people are saying about Conor McGregor, just, well, I don't want to just say
Reel off a lot of insults, yeah, of course,
yeah. I don't want to read, like, obviously for legal purposes as well. I don't think I can say them, but it's definitely had a detrimental effect on it, and that's why and I don't mean to go off in a tangent. It's refreshing that we're having figures like Tom Aspinall, who are salt of the earth, good people, come to the fore and help change perceptions of the sport. And obviously over back in Ireland, you've got the great Paul Hughes. And even though he is pretty much Brazilian at this moment in time, Ian Machado Gary.
Whoa.
I'm joking. I love Ian. I love
Yeah.
Ian.
We all love Ian.
Yeah, we all love him, but
Especially Petesy.
The most.
But no, yeah, it's sad that the effect that this has had on the sport, and sadly, mainstream media, everybody is going to ask MMA fighters, in particular UFC fighters, about, oh, what do you think about the Conor McGregor thing? Obviously, we talked about, I just mentioned Tom Aspinall there. Piers Morgan tried his best to get a line out of Tom, but
Yeah.
Tom just said, "Look, if it happened, it's a bad thing, what have you." But yeah, the effect of this, well, it's not as seismic as it is in Ireland. Obviously, some brands have stopped stocking some McGregor related items over here, and I don't believe. Well, I can't remember if it was in Ireland or if it was in the UK where the mural of McGregor was being painted over.
This is in Northern Ireland, I believe. Yeah.
Oh, was it Northern Ireland? Okay. Well,
Oh, kind of both.
That's the UK, so it's geological.
A little from column A, a little from column B.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, sadly, the sport at this moment in time, there's going to be a hangover from this, and it's going to affect perceptions for a while, for sure.
Well, lads, that is all we have for you today. Thank you so much to Andy Stevenson, to Donagh Corby, and the great Chisanga Malata. I love you boys very much. It's great to have all of the band back together. Who knows? Maybe you'll get on in a couple of years again and you can tell everybody you were back on the Craic. But no, I love you guys so much.
Is this like a quadrant of knowledge, or how do we...
This is like a fork. A fork of fury, I believe.
A fork of fury.
Yeah.
One thing, right? I need to address the flat Earth thing. So it was to be factual.
You believe in it?
I have to be factual. It was a PFL post in which they said 3 things Dean Garnett thinks are true, with an image of Lewis McGrillen, which I can show here.
They've misled you.
So yeah, I was misled. And the 3 things that Dean Garnett thought were true, allegedly, were lizard people are real, the earth is flat, he will knock me out. And they said only one is wrong here. So I was not calling Lewis McGrillen a flat earther. The PFL misled me. The PFL
But after all our compliments to PFL, Donagh, this is a terrible way to leave things.
Bad luck for the PFL.
Well,
look into it.
I love you very much. Thank you for joining me on the review show. Thank you for joining me on the preview show. Hope to hear more of you on this beautiful show next year. Thank you all for listening. Have a great 2025. Thank you to Oscar Losef. Thank you to On Air Jordan, but not to Mysterious Frank, who stopped coming to the recordings of our shows. Mwah.